Koreans opposed, of course, the Japanese colonial management from the beginning. In the 1919, the March 1st movement was launched and millions of people demanded strongly Korean independence. A provisional government was established in Shanghai, China. Many young patriots ran to Manchuria to become independent soldiers. They made great strides, such as defeating regular Japanese troops at the Battle of Cheongsanri and Bongodong near Tumen River. Even after that, young Koreans who aspired for independence continued a strong struggle, including assassination of a Japanese general and high-ranking officials. You may know the patriotic struggle by Mr. Yoon Bong-gil. Japan promoted so-called modernization in order to effectively dominate colonial Korea and to prepare the foothold to invade Manchuria and mainland China. The noisy debate among scholars over the legitimacy and effectiveness of colonial modernization continues. However, if you examine it a little deeper, it is clear that Japan's initiatives for industrialization and railroad construction were merely colonial policies with the interest of the invaders in mind. You should take the historical facts seriously. From the 1930s, the total war system was put into operation when Japan invaded mainland China. Soon after, even Asian countries turned into battlefields, and it was difficult to even express the Koreans' burden suffered under the wartime mobilization system. During the colonial era, Koreans went through serious trauma, especially through conscription and forced manpower mobilizations, exploitations of women's labor, and the comfort woman system. Nevertheless, Japanese politicians are still lingering on those issues without taking appropriate measures. However, the Japanese colonial rule, which seemed to last forever, came to an end. In August 1945, with the defeat of Japan, Korea regained its political independence. Of course, the fate of the new modern nation was painful. But the new road, which was full of hardships, brought great rewards to the nation. In the summer of 1945, the United States dropped nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, with a lag of a few days. It was, of course, morally reprehensible, but it contributed greatly to ending the boring war. Japan immediately surrendered unconditionally to the United States. Then, according to the Cairo Declaration 1943, Korea's independence came true. However, the fate of the Korean peninsula darkened again as the United States accepted the Soviet Union's demand for division of the Korean peninsula. The United States and the Soviet Union negotiated a trusteeship agreement on the peninsula. And domestic political forces also experienced intense conflicts over the pros and cons of the trusteeship issue. However, when it was revealed that the United States and the Soviet Union had a rigid will to divide the old Eastern country, the political forces that responded to it grew in Korea as well. They had conflicts with nationalists who opposed the division of the nation. And in 1948, they created two Korean governments, the Republic of Korea in the south and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the north. After World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union waged a Cold War in various parts of the world, maximizing their influence. Modern Greece, one of the most important geopolitical countries, has been involved in the civil war since 1946, supported by two countries which ruled the world, and the war continued until 1949. In the midst of the Cold War, terrible civil war finally broke out on the Korean Peninsula as well. This was the Korean War in 1950, which was nothing short of proxy war between the United States and the Soviet Union. During the 3-year war, the land was wholly devastated and all industrial infrastructure was destroyed. There were about 10 million separated persons from their own families, and when both sides are combined, the death toll amounts to nearly 1 million. More than 70 years after the war began, it has not been officially ended. Since the new government had been through a long and terrifying war, there were no proper factory facilities anywhere in Korea. Millions of people emigrated from north to the south while the national economy was hitting bottom, making it even more difficult to be barely living. South Korea is also politically immature, and the present Syngman Rhee's dictatorship has continued for over 10 years. Civil dissatisfaction grew year after year and exploded in the spring of 1960. It's because the Syngman Rhee's administration used various corruptive measures in the presidential election. The demonstration started as an expression of students' anxiety, turned into political turmoil, and the Syngman Rhee regime collapsed at the end. History calls this the April 19th Students' Revolution. In the same year, Syngman Rhee fled to the United States, and the Democratic Party came into power. At that time, Korea did not have the ability to become self-reliant, so it was only able to sustain its livelihood with a foreign aid, especially provided by the United States. As head of the cabinet, Prime Minister Chang Myon made considerable efforts to revive the national economy using 5-year economic plan as the main means, but failed to maintain the government and collapsed in the next year, 1961. General Park Chung-hee, who looked for opportunities to launch a coup over the years, finally launched a military coup. It was May the 16th, 1961. Not so long ago, the Kennedy administration in the United States, tired of supporting the Korean government, set up an economic planning group with a special mission. They formulated a long-term plan for Korea's economic revival. Their economic development plan was to make Korea an export-led industrial country. The U.S. government treatment threatened and appeased the Korean general, and the Korean modernization centered on light industry began eventually. The Park, former officer in the Japanese Kwantung Army, witnessed firsthand the economic plan implemented by the Japanese military in Manchuria. He took the Kwantung Army's experience as example, so he intensively nurtured the heavy and chemical industry and bred chaebol or Korean conglomerates to bring them under the rule of power. The Korean dictator carried out the October Restoration in an attempt to gain permanent power and treated the chaebol as his property. His policy of modernizing the motherland or fatherland was resolute, but no one dared to disobey it. In the midst of this, political tensions between Korea and the United States escalated, putting the general's regime in jeopardy. I think Mr. Park Chung-hee was epitome of militarism. Under his authoritarian dictatorship, the human rights and interests of workers were completely ignored. In 1970, the tailor Mr. Chun Tae-il launched the labor movement against the dictatorship as an alter ego. Towards the end of the Park's military regime, workers fought against the chaebol and the government through collective action more frequently. Mr. Park was self-righteous, claiming that only he could save the country from poverty. He forcibly enacted a constitution that guaranteed his permanent power and called it the Yushin Constitution. Civil society and intellectuals demanded the abolition of the dictator's constitution and called for democratization. As rigid nationalists, they were also deeply concerned with reconciliation between the two Korean states. As citizens opposed the dictatorship, rifts arose within the power. And on October 26, 1979, the Park Chung-il regime collapsed. When he was shot and killed by his subordinate, Korea was the world's third largest foreign debtor. The democratization movements, which began to escalate at the end of the Park's regime, developed it into a widespread resistance movement by students and intellectuals, including writers, in the 1980s.